Robert secures the area and tasks Vardis and Lycos with interrogating the 4 surviving bandits to discover the location of their base for a counterattack. He then asks for a debriefing from each team leader, detailing their perspective on the battle. Cassius, Fabian, Neas, and Marius each provide their accounts. Robert uses the debriefing to emphasize the importance of understanding weapon limitations, especially in ambushes, and to reinforce the concept of a planned ambush with designated killing zones and blocking points. He praises their success and directs them to secure the prisoners, plan for potential future failures, clean up the area, and remove the bandits' armor for future use. With the 4 injured bandits secured and groaning under the watchful eyes of guards, Robert approached Vardis and Lycos. Their faces were set, grim already, ready for the unpleasant task ahead. Robert, however, had a different concern than just extracting information. Vardis, Lycos, Robert began, his voice low, before you begin, tell me your standard procedures for interrogating enemy prisoners. How do you go about it? Vardis, ever the pragmatist, wiped a smear of dirt from his cheek. Master Robert, for brigands and those who defy the consul's authority, it is straightforward. We apply pressure. He held up a calloused hand. First, deprivation. No food, no water, no rest. Second, pain, if the first does not yield. A few lashes. Pressure points. Simple, effective. The goal is to break their will and make them speak. Lycos, a leaner, quieter man, added, for slaves or non-citizens, it is well within the law to use the lash, or more direct methods, to compel truth. Their testimony is often not considered valid without it. For freemen, unless they are proven traitors to the Imperium or practitioners of forbidden arts, we generally seek to induce confession through prolonged questioning and discomfort, rather than outright torture, unless the information is vital and time is short. These bandits, however, he gestured to the captives, they are no citizens of good standing. They are dogs, and deserve a dog's treatment if they do not bark. Robert listened, his brow furrowed. His mind immediately went to the modern understanding of interrogation, the unreliability of information extracted under duress, the false confessions. Yet, he knew this wasn't his world. He remembered how the Romans in his history class wouldn't hesitate. Severe pain to get information or confessions from non-citizens or slaves, especially, he recalled. And these bandits likely fall into that non-citizen of good standing category, if not worse. I understand the methods, Robert said slowly. But my concern is the data. Is the information obtained under such pressure always reliable? Do they not simply say what you want to hear to end the suffering? We need accurate intelligence to find their base, not false trails. Vardis and Lycos exchanged a glance. Reliable enough, Master Robert, Vardis stated, though there was a hint of a shrug in his posture. Once they break, the truth usually comes out. They fear the consequences of a lie more than the pain. Lycos added, we watch their eyes, their intent. We corroborate with what little we already know. It is the quickest way. Robert sighed inwardly. He knew this was their reality. He couldn't impose Geneva Conventions here. He'd have to find a way to verify their information, perhaps using his own technology. Very well, Robert said, his voice firm. Proceed. But listen carefully for inconsistencies. We need to know where their true base is, their numbers, their leadership, and if they have any allies. We'll take what you learn as hostage testimony to be corroborated. We need to know where their base is for a counterattack. Wait, Robert added, just as Vardis and Lycos prepared to move towards the captives. One more thing. These bandit groups, do they have any sort of coordination? Do they confirm their presence to each other, or send constant messages to update a central command? He frowned. And it would be best to separate them when we interrogate them. Question them individually. I also want to hear how you ask questions on the first prisoner. Vardis nodded, understanding the logic of isolating them. Master Robert, they are not a legion with constant communication. They are opportunists. Sometimes, if a large raid is planned, small bands might converge, but they are not centrally commanded like the Imperium's forces. Messages are sent through runners, sometimes once a week if they share a larger camp, but not constant. They are more concerned with their own haul. He gestured to Lycos. We will separate them. The first interrogation, Lycos and the Crimson Hound. The first captive, a wiry man with a broken nose and fear-glazed eyes, was dragged to a spot slightly out of earshot of the others, but close enough for Robert to observe and listen. Vardis stood silently, a looming presence, while Lycos knelt, his face impassive. Robert moved closer, hidden by the trees, his universal translator buzzing faintly in his mind as it processed the captive's terrified whispers and Lycos' measured questions. What is your name? Lycos began, his voice calm, almost conversational. The bandit mumbled something unintelligible. Lycos' hand, unexpectedly fast, snapped out and gripped the bandit's jaw, squeezing. Speak clearly. Your name. Now. Rorik, the man gasped, pain and fear contorting his face. Rorik. And to whom do you pledge your loyalty? Lycos' tone remained even. The Crimson Hounds. Rorik spat, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. The Crimson Hounds, Lycos repeated, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. A fine name for dogs who ambush honest travelers. Where is your master's kennel, Rorik? Where do the hounds sleep? Rorik's eyes darted. I know nothing. We camp where we find shelter. Vardis stepped forward then, a shadow falling over the prisoner. He produced a sharp, glinting dagger from his belt, letting the point hover inches from Rorik's face. The blades of Castilio's cut deep, Rorik. They do not discriminate between a bandit's hide and a traitor's tongue. Your companions are already telling us what we need to know. It was a bluff, but effective. Rorik whimpered, his defiance crumbling. No. They know nothing. Lycos leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Your companions speak of a valley, Rorik. North of the old road near the Three Sisters rock formation. Is that where the pack leader awaits you? Rorik's eyes flickered, betraying his fear. The Three Sisters, it's a rendezvous. Not the camp. A rendezvous for what? Lycos pressed, his grip on Rorik's jaw tightening. More caravans. From the north. They come in 2 days. Rorik choked out, pain and terror overwhelming him. And the true camp? Vardis's voice was a low growl, the dagger point pressing lightly against Rorik's throat. Where do your leaders truly reside? Rorik gasped, tears streaming down his face. The old logging camp. Hidden behind the waterfall in the Broken Tooth Gulch. It's 3 hours north from the Three Sisters. They'll kill me if I tell you. Lycos pulled Vardis's dagger away, a nod of satisfaction passing between them. They will kill you slower, Rorik, if you lie. He then looked directly at Robert, still hidden in the shadows, and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The initial information was out. Blindfold them, Robert instructed Vardis, his gaze cold as he looked at the 4 injured bandits. All of them. And bring me the next one. Pick someone caught by a different team. He wanted to minimize any chance of shared information or collusion between the captives. Vardis nodded, and soon, the 4 prisoners were blindfolded, their movements further restricted. Another bandit, a burly man who had been caught by Nias's team on the right flank, was brought forward, his legs wobbling from a painful arrow wound in his thigh. He was roughly set down before Vardis and Lycos. Robert positioned himself again, a silent observer, focusing his attention on the raw data he hoped to extract. The second interrogation, Vardis and the Crimson Hound. Vardis took the lead this time, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the forest floor. Speak, dog. Your name. The captive winced, trying to pull away. I am Vesper. I mean no harm. Vesper, Vardis repeated, the name flat. You mean no harm, yet you carry a sword against travelers? To whom do you pledge your allegiance, Vesper? The Crimson Hounds. We simply collect tolls. The land is harsh. Vesper blurted, desperation clinging to his words. Lycos knelt beside Vardis, pulling out a small, sharp stone, not quite a knife, but enough to exert painful pressure. He pressed it against a sensitive point on Vesper's neck, just below the ear. Vesper gasped, a stifled cry of agony. Tolls, you say? Lycos murmured, his voice deceptively soft. Or plunder? Where is your leader, Vesper? Where do the Crimson Hounds gather their ill-gotten gains? Vesper whimpered, shaking his head. I only follow orders. We just meet at the crossroads before the caravans. The crossroads near the Three Sisters? Vardas's voice was a harsh whisper now. Do not lie, Vesper. Your companion, Rorik, he has already given us much. Are you a fool who values pain over honesty? Vesper flinched at the mention of Rorik. The bluff landed. No, not a fool. Yes, the Three Sisters. We meet there before the caravans on the second day after the market, and the fifth. Tuesday and Friday, Robert confirmed inwardly, the translator making sense of the days he'd heard before. The consistency was a good sign. And your true lair, Vesper? Lycos pressed, the stone digging deeper. Where do your leaders divide their spoils? Where is the main camp? The old logging camp. Vesper choked out, tears streaming from beneath his blindfold. Behind the waterfall in the Broken Tooth Gulch. It's 3 hours north from the Three Sisters. Please. They will kill me. Vardas released him, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. The second testimony matched the first. Robert had the confirmation he needed. The raw data felt reliable. With the 2 previous interrogations complete, Robert still felt a nagging sensation. Despite the consistencies, he couldn't shake the feeling that Vardas and Lycos were subtly leading the prisoners, perhaps inadvertently, towards the answers they expected. This was precisely what Robert had been afraid of: compromised data. Separate all of them, Robert instructed, his voice firm. Make sure they cannot talk at all. Put gags on their mouths too. He then singled out the third prisoner, a teammate of the first captive, who was notably better looking than the rest. Robert, with a cynical glint in his eye, guessed this man might be some sort of gigolo, valuing his looks and perhaps his equipment more than others. I'll be taking the lead on the investigation of this one, he announced, surprising Vardas and Lycos. The location for this next interrogation was chosen carefully, far enough from the other prisoners that even the faintest wails of discomfort would be inaudible. Robert found a spot where he could position a small mirror he carried, propping it up to reflect the sunlight that sparsely filtered through the forest canopy. As the third prisoner was brought and seated, Robert made sure the reflected light struck directly at his face, a subtle but disorienting pressure. The third interrogation, Robert's turn. Robert nodded to Lycos. Take off his gag and blindfold. The bandit flinched as the fabric was removed, blinking rapidly against the sudden, focused glare of the reflected sunlight. He looked at Robert, then at Vardas and Lycos standing impassively nearby. Robert leaned in, his voice calm and even, a stark contrast to the rougher tones the prisoner might expect. Greetings. My name is Robert Lake. These two, he gestured briefly to Vardas and Lycos, are not as friendly as I am, should they take over the questioning. For your sake, it would be best if you spoke clearly and truthfully to me. Now, what is your name, and where are you from? The prisoner squinted, trying to adjust to the light, then shifted uncomfortably. I am Zephyr. From a small village called Ethelberg, in the northern foothills. Zephyr, Robert repeated, memorizing the name and village. What was your position within your organization? And what is the name of your organization? Zephyr hesitated, his eyes darting to Vardas's stern face, then back to Robert's unnervingly calm expression. I am a scout. And a collector. We are the Crimson Hounds. And before you were a collector for the Crimson Hounds, Zephyr, what were you? What was your life before this? Do you have family? Robert's questions were designed to establish a baseline, to understand the man behind the bandit, hoping to find a pressure point beyond mere pain. Robert nodded, absorbing the previous answers, his focus unwavering on the bandit, Zephyr. He had to be sure. And before you were a collector for the Crimson Hounds, Zephyr, Robert continued, his voice calm, what were you? What was your life before this? Do you have family? Zephyr flinched, the reflected sunlight on his face making him squint. He hesitated, then a weary sigh escaped him. Before this? I was a farmer, Master Robert. From a small holding, just outside Ethelberg. The land was harsh, and the harvests grew leaner with each passing year. The taxes, they became impossible. His voice dropped, a hint of genuine sorrow in it. My family, my wife, Lyra, and our 2 young daughters. They are still there. Or at least, they were when I left. It was a choice between seeing them starve or doing this. I needed to send them coin. He swallowed hard. They know nothing of this. I send what I can through a neutral merchant, saying I found work in a distant mine. A wave of understanding, tinged with a familiar weariness, passed through Robert. He'd seen this story before, countless times, in different forms. Desperation driving good men to bad ends. It was a universal constant, regardless of the world. Robert nodded, absorbing the previous answers, his focus unwavering on the bandit, Zephyr. He had to be sure. And before you were a collector for the Crimson Hounds, Zephyr, Robert continued, his voice calm, what were you? What was your life before this? Do you have family? Zephyr flinched, the reflected sunlight on his face making him squint. He hesitated, then a weary sigh escaped him. Before this, I was a farmer, Master Robert. From a small holding, just outside Ethelberg. The land was harsh, and the harvests grew leaner with each passing year. The taxes, they became impossible. His voice dropped, a hint of genuine sorrow in it. My family, my wife, Lyra, and our 2 young daughters. They are still there. Or at least, they were when I left. It was a choice between seeing them starve or doing this. I needed to send them coin. He swallowed hard. They know nothing of this. I send what I can through a neutral merchant, saying I found work in a distant mine. A wave of understanding, tinged with a familiar weariness, passed through Robert. He'd seen this story before, countless times, in different forms. Desperation driving good men to bad ends. It was a universal constant, regardless of the world. Robert nodded slowly, processing Zephyr's confession about his family. The desperation, the fabricated story of mining work, it resonated. But Robert needed more, to gauge the man's reliability and to potentially verify his story later. You said you send coin through a neutral merchant, Robert pressed, his voice still calm, but with an underlying sharpness. What did this merchant tell you about your family, the last time you sent money? How are they? Zephyr flinched, the memories clearly painful. The merchant, he said they were well, for now, he whispered, his eyes glazing over as if seeing them. My wife, Lyra, strong, but thin. The girls, he said they looked healthy enough, though always hungry. It was a few weeks ago. I sent them 2 denarii. He said it would last them for a moon or so, if they were careful. But the harvest was poor, and the taxes, the Solarian Imperium demands its due, even from bare fields. He swallowed, a fresh wave of despair washing over him. He said they prayed for rain, and for my safe return. And that they missed me. The raw honesty in Zephyr's voice, the depth of his despair for his family, struck Robert. This wasn't just a bandit, this was a desperate man caught in a harsh system. The details about the poor harvest and taxes also aligned with what Consul Valerus had hinted at regarding the region's struggles. Robert nodded slowly, processing Zephyr's confession about his family. The desperation, the fabricated story of mining work, it resonated. But Robert needed more, to gauge the man's reliability and to potentially verify his story later. You said you send coin through a neutral merchant, Robert pressed, his voice still calm, but with an underlying sharpness. What did this merchant tell you about your family, the last time you sent money? How are they? Zephyr flinched, the memories clearly painful. The merchant, he said they were well, for now, he whispered, his eyes glazing over as if seeing them. My wife, Lyra, strong, but thin. The girls, he said they looked healthy enough, though always hungry. It was a few weeks ago. I sent them 2 denarii. He said it would last them for a moon or so, if they were careful. But the harvest was poor, and the taxes, the Solarian Imperium demands its due, even from bare fields. He swallowed, a fresh wave of despair washing over him. He said they prayed for rain, and for my safe return. And that they missed me. The raw honesty in Zephyr's voice, the depth of his despair for his family, struck Robert. This wasn't just a bandit, this was a desperate man caught in a harsh system. The details about the poor harvest and taxes also aligned with what Consul Valerus had hinted at regarding the region's struggles. Robert pressed on, his questions rapid-fire, designed to catch inconsistencies. What is the name of this merchant? And where is he from? Zephyr hesitated, his gaze darting around as if trying to find an escape. His name is Master Kailas. He's from Valerus's Crossing, a trading post far to the southeast, near the mountains. And where did you meet Master Kailas? Robert's voice remained calm, almost conversational, a stark contrast to the pressure Lycos and Vardis might apply. Usually at the Old Oak, near the Crossroads Inn, just outside Ethelberg, Zephyr mumbled, the discomfort of the spotlight growing evident. He passes through on his way to the smaller villages. When did you last meet this Master Kailas? It was 2 weeks ago. Before the last market caravan passed through. He was heading south. And what merchandise does Master Kailas typically sell? He deals in common goods, Zephyr recited, as if relieved to talk about something less personal. Salt, dried fish, simple tools, woven blankets, sometimes a few barrels of wine. Nothing grand. He serves the smaller villages that bigger caravans ignore. Robert nodded, absorbing every detail. The merchant's name, origin, meeting point, and merchandise, all specific details that could potentially be verified. It was a good start. Robert quickly pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook and a pen from a hidden pocket in his Gandalf cloak. The act of writing, so mundane in his old world, felt like a deliberate, almost magical gesture here. He scribbled a list of questions, his neat handwriting a stark contrast to the rough parchment and crude quills of this land. How far is Ethelberg from us and in which direction? How far is Valerus's Crossing from us and in which direction? What are the specific types of merchandise that merchants usually bring that get robbed in this area? Listen for the villages where this merchant Kailas takes his merchandise as I question him next. And write down any inconsistencies. He then caught Vardis's eye, signaling him over silently. He whispered, Vardis, can you read? Vardis nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. A little, Master Robert. Enough for muster rolls and basic accounts. Lycos reads better. Good, Robert said, handing him the notebook. I've written some questions here. Have Lycos read these to you, and then I want you to answer them, based on what we already know from our own intel. We need this general information for our overall picture. And the last one, he tapped the paper, about Kailas's routes and villages, that's what we need to specifically listen for from the other prisoners later. Note any inconsistencies when you do. Vardis took the notebook, his brow furrowed with concentration as he handed it to Lycos, who quickly scanned the writing. Ethelberg, Master Robert, Vardis began, answering the first question from his own knowledge. It's approximately 2 days' march to the north-northeast from here, perhaps a day beyond the ambush pass itself. Valerus's Crossing, Vardis continued for the second. That's a major trading hub, lying about 3 to 4 days' march to the southeast, across the Great River. That's a journey not for the faint of heart. The merchandise usually robbed in this area varies, of course, depending on the caravan's wealth, Vardis explained for the third question. But generally, it's grain, cured meats, fine textiles, metal tools, and sometimes more valuable goods like imported wines or crafted jewelry if the caravan is known to carry them. As for Master Kailas's specific routes and villages, Vardis admitted, we don't know those details from our existing knowledge. He's one of many smaller traders who avoid the main roads. But we will listen for it from the other captives, as you instruct. Lycos will ensure notes are taken. Robert turned back to Zephyr, who squirmed uncomfortably under the direct glare of the reflected sunlight. Oh, I forgot to ask you this, Robert began, his tone almost casual. How long have you been with what was your organization again? Zephyr hesitated, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. The Crimson Hounds, he mumbled, as if surprised Robert had forgotten. I've been with them since the last harvest. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. So, since the last harvest. How long is that, precisely? They trust you enough to be a scout, to tell you their rendezvous points. That sounds like quite a long time, has it? Robert pressed, his calm voice hiding a steel edge. Zephyr shifted again, the pressure of the questions, devoid of physical pain but unsettlingly precise, clearly getting to him. No, Master Robert, not since the very last harvest. The one before that. 2 seasons, almost 2 years now. I've earned their trust. I guide them through the paths only a local knows. Robert nodded, making a mental note of the 2-year duration, and the implication of his knowledge of the local paths. All right. Now, tell me about Master Kailas. When did you first meet him? Zephyr blinked, the question seemingly coming from left field. Kailas? I met him after my first moon with the hounds. My first raid. Did someone introduce him to you, or did he introduce himself? Robert's questions were like a net, slowly tightening. He introduced himself, Zephyr stammered, a new note of discomfort in his voice. He was passing through Ethelberg. I was watching the road, hiding. He saw me, or sensed me, I don't know. He simply stopped his cart, walked into the trees, and offered me work. Not with the hounds, but as a courier. To send letters, coin. He seemed to know what I was. He said he had friends who appreciated discretion. And what merchandise does this Master Kailas sell? Robert asked, ostensibly confirming but truly listening for any subtle deviation. Common goods, as I said, Zephyr replied, a bit more firmly, as if returning to solid ground. Salt, dried fish, simple tools, woven blankets, sometimes a few barrels of wine. And small trinkets, from the lands he travels to. Nothing grand. Robert absorbed it all. The consistency of the merchandise, the method of contact, but the initiation of contact by Kailas was an interesting detail. A merchant who sought out a hiding bandit. He needed to compare this with the other prisoner's statements. Robert continued with the questioning, a faint smile playing on his lips as he processed Vardas's answers, confirming the overall layout of the region. His smile, though entirely internal, further confused Zephyr, whose vision was already a bit obfuscated by the glare of the sun's reflection. My apologies, Zephyr, Robert said, his voice smooth. There were other matters that needed attending, and they have been seen to. He paused, his gaze firm. Shall we continue with the questioning? It wasn't a choice. So, Zephyr, Robert began, have you ever been to Valerus's crossing? Zephyr blinked, the question seemingly unrelated to his crimes. Valerus's crossing? No, Master. Not often. It's a very large place. Too far for us, usually. Only the leaders go that far, sometimes. He shifted, trying to get comfortable despite his injuries. Not often. Robert pressed, his tone mild. But you have been there, then? Perhaps with your leaders? Zephyr hesitated, a flicker of fear in his eyes. Yes, Master. Once. Many moons ago. With the leader, for a large meeting. All right, Robert noted. Now, Master Kailas, the merchant you spoke of. Can you name the villages that he typically goes to? Zephyr frowned, trying to recall. Villages? He goes to Halfton, and Oakhaven, and sometimes Stonebrook. And, of course, Ethelberg. Robert cut him off, a gentle, almost wistful expression on his face. We just wanted to know, Zephyr, because there are no merchants coming to Castilio's anymore, and ours isn't a large town, really. More of a village at that. We don't even have a proper market. We had hoped Kailas might pass by us. Zephyr's hardened features softened slightly at the appeal. He seemed to genuinely feel for a moment. Yes, those are the ones, he confirmed. Halfton is a farming village, Oakhaven is known for its woodcutters, and Stonebrook for its quarrymen. Excellent, Robert said, pushing the advantage. Can you elaborate on where these villages are, Zephyr? That way, perhaps we can catch him on his route and persuade him to come to Castilio's, to help our people. Zephyr, less guarded now, began to describe their locations. Halfton is southwest of Ethelberg, a half-day's walk through the low hills. Oakhaven is directly west of Halfton, at the edge of the Great Forest. Stonebrook is further south, near the old river. He paused, trying to mentally trace the routes. Kailis usually follows the old Imperial Road north from Valerus's Crossing, then veers west to Stonebrook, then north through Oakhaven to Halfton, and then to Ethelberg before turning back south. He avoids the main routes near Castilio's because of us. Robert turned to Vardis and Lycos, his stick quickly drawing a makeshift map in the dirt. He sketched a simple representation. Here is where we are now. He marked a point. And Castilio's is roughly here, indicating its relative position. Then he added other points, the Three Sisters, Ethelberg, and Valerus's Crossing. He pointed to Zephyr's described route. And these are the villages Kailis visits. He handed the stick to Vardis. Vardis, Lycos, draw these locations onto your own maps, if you have them. Write them down with their relative distances and directions as Zephyr described. This should give us the actual location and perhaps reveal the true mastermind of this outfit. Vardis, still amazed by Robert's methods, meticulously began to etch the new details onto a piece of smooth leather he used as a map, Lycos assisting. Robert turned back to Zephyr, his expression changing to one of slight apology. My apologies, Zephyr, something else came up. So, when was your last robbery here, at this ambush point? Robert asked, his voice returning to its calm, investigative tone. Zephyr swallowed. It was last Tuesday, Master. We hit a small grain caravan heading south. Robert paused, then a sudden, pointed question. Wait. You said you have children? A family? Zephyr's eyes, though still stinging from the light, widened in surprise and a flicker of raw fear. Yes, Master. My wife, Lyra, and our two daughters, Ilara and Mara. Why do you ask? Robert nodded, a knowing look in his eyes as Zephyr spoke of his family. He pushed the emotional lever, feigning empathy. Oh, nothing, Zephyr, Robert said, his voice softening. I just got hitched, you know, and I was wondering what it was like with your firstborn. How did you feel? Zephyr blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected personal turn. His eyes, though still struggling with the light, seemed to soften. My Lyra, he whispered, a distant, tender look on his face. It was a miracle, Master. The smallest hands, gripping my finger. Fear, yes, but mostly a fierce pride. A purpose. I felt like a true father. A tear escaped and traced a path down his dust-smeared cheek. You said you sent the money, Robert continued, quickly, not allowing the emotion to linger too long. Through this Master Kailis? Yes, Master, Zephyr confirmed, nodding quickly. Every few moons, when we had a good haul. And when exactly was the last time you sent money through him? Robert pressed, his tone mild but insistent. It was 2 weeks ago, exactly, Zephyr replied, trying to recall precisely. Just before the last Tuesday caravan. Master Kailis was heading south, to Valerus's Crossing, he said. Robert paused, letting the information settle. Then he delivered the bait. Now, Zephyr, you're a captive here. How will you meet up with Master Kailis now? And where and when? Someone has to give him the news, and he could send word to your family, couldn't he? The unspoken offer hung in the air. Cooperate, and perhaps your family will know you're alive. Zephyr's eyes snapped open wide, hope flickering in their depths, overriding his pain and fear. Kailis, he has a rendezvous, Master. A safe house, in the old village of Thorn's End, deep in the forest, southwest of Ethelberg. He meets anyone he needs to deal with there. He uses a coded message, left under a loose stone by the old well. And if he doesn't receive a message from us by the market day, he assumes we're gone. He's due back in the region in about 5 days, maybe 6, after making his rounds. He travels carefully, avoids the main roads, only passes through at night. Robert nodded slowly, his expression unreadable as he processed Zephyr's frantic confession. Then, he spoke, his voice calm, almost detached, laying out the pieces of the puzzle for Zephyr to see. Let me summarize this for you, Zephyr. Your Master Kailis tells you when a caravan passes by, through some channels, correct? Then you guys, the Crimson Hounds, you rob that caravan. He pays you money, and you also take some of the loot, I suppose. Then, he takes all these stolen goods, presumably, to Valeruz's crossing and sells them there. How far off am I? Zephyr's eyes widened behind the painful glare, a dawning horror spreading across his face. His jaw worked, and he began to stammer, a choked sound escaping him. Why, you're almost right on, master. Almost. Then, the full weight of Robert's words crashed down on him. The way Robert had strung the information together, it painted a picture Zephyr hadn't consciously seen before. Kailas wasn't just a fence, he was orchestrating it, leading the hounds, with Zephyr's own leaders merely foot soldiers in Kailas's grander scheme. He let out a choked sob. I spilled the beans, without knowing it. No. Robert ignored his despair, pressing on. And what of Thorn's End, Zephyr? You speak of rendezvous points, of knowing paths only a local knows, of being a scout and a collector. You don't seem to be merely a foot soldier in this Crimson Hound's outfit. Clearly, you're higher up. Elaborate. Zephyr's eyes, wide with a profound dread, fixed on Robert. He knew, utterly, devastatingly, that he had just exposed the true hierarchy and his own significant role within it. The calm, methodical questioning, so different from brute force, had peeled away his defenses, leaving him utterly exposed. He was, indeed, higher up than a mere scout, and the realization brought him to a terrified, shuddering halt. No, no. Zephyr choked, desperately shaking his head, though his body was still pinned by his injuries. Tears welled in his eyes, not just from physical pain, but from the crushing weight of betrayal. Thorn's End, that's just a meeting place for couriers, not for the hounds. And the Three Sisters, it's a rallying point. We gather there, yes, but only to split up immediately, to disperse into the forest paths leading to our respective ambush points. It's to avoid eyes, to not draw suspicion with a large gathering before a raid. His voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with despair. My position. I am one of Kailas's eyes, master. A pathfinder. I map the routes, assess the caravans, and report directly to him. The leaders you saw, they are merely captains of the raiding parties. Kailas, he is the true head. He oversees all the gangs, not just the hounds. He sells the biggest hauls. Zephyr whimpered, completely broken now. Our true base, it's not the logging camp. That's just a temporary hideout for the lesser bands. Kailas's main stronghold, where the true wealth is gathered, where the Hound's central command resides, it's called the Serpent's Coil. It's hidden deep within the furthest reach of the northern peaks, a stronghold carved into the very mountainside, accessible only by a single treacherous path. 3 days' hard march beyond the Broken Tooth Gulch waterfall. Only a few of us know the way, and only Kailas and his closest advisors have ever been there. He was sobbing openly now, the words tumbling out as if purging a poison. Please, Master Robert, my family, do not let them suffer for my weakness. The fourth interrogation, the hardened veteran, corrected interrogation start. The last captive was brought forward, his blindfold and gag removed. He blinked against the reflected sunlight, but his gaze held no fear, only a weary defiance. Robert leaned forward. What is your name? Where are you from? The man's voice was rough, unyielding. Corvus. From nowhere, really. Born on the road. Left at an orphanage in a distant town, long since crumbled. No family. Never had one. Corvus, Robert acknowledged. And what was your position within your organization? What do you call yourselves? Just a fighter, Corvus grunted. A blade. Crimson Hounds, we are. Been with them since the leader found me hungry and alone near the Eastern Pass. 10 years now. His eyes held a hard, distant memory. 10 years, Robert noted. And before that? What did you do, before the hounds found you? Whatever work was available. Guarding trade carts for a few coins, digging ditches, hauling stone. Anything to eat. Never learned to read or write. Just survival. Robert paused, considering. This was a man without ties, a professional survivor. Emotional appeals wouldn't work here. He shifted his approach, his voice calm, methodical. Corvus, tell me about your leader. The man you called leader when you ambushed the cart. Is he the highest authority in the Crimson Hounds? Robert asked, careful not to use any names he had heard from Zephyr. Corvus scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. Our captain? Ulfa. He commands us on raids, yes. He's the one you killed, the one with the fancy helmet. A hint of satisfaction in his voice at Ulfa's demise. But no. He takes orders. Orders from whom? Robert pressed, his eyes fixed on Corvus's face, searching for any tell. Who is the true boss? The man above Ulfa? Corvus's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion finally entering them. This was the question they didn't like. Why do you care? You killed Ulfa, you got the loot. That's usually the end of it. He clamped his jaw shut. Robert nodded to Vardis, who stepped forward, not with a weapon, but with a small, unlit brazier and a pouch. He set it down, and the metallic clink of small, vicious-looking tools could be heard from within the pouch. The silent threat was more potent than any spoken word. We care, Corvus, Robert said, his voice now colder, because we intend to eliminate the threat, not just a symptom. And we know you know. Your companion has already been cooperative. It's only a matter of time before we have all the pieces. It would be easier for you to provide them directly. Who truly leads the Crimson Hounds? Corvus stared at the brazier, then at the pouch, his defiant gaze finally wavering. There's a merchant, he grunted, reluctantly. He's the one. He gives Ulfa the roots, pays us, takes the best of the haul. A merchant, Robert repeated, keeping his voice neutral. Does he have a name? Corvus hesitated for a long moment, then spat the name as if it burned his tongue. Kylus. Where is Kylus from? Robert asked. And where does he conduct his business, the main place where he sells these stolen goods? Corvus, Robert pressed, his voice neutral but firm. Where is Kylus from? And where does he conduct his business, the main place where he sells these stolen goods? Corvus hesitated, a faint tremor running through his hardened frame. This was crucial information, the kind that got men killed if it was revealed. He glanced at Vardis, then at Lycos, who stood silently, their faces unreadable. The sight of the unlit brazier and the glint of metal from Lycos' pouch seemed to loom larger in the oppressive silence. He's from Valerus's crossing, Corvus finally grunted, his voice tight with reluctance. He has a large warehouse there, near the docks, disguised as a legitimate merchant's house. That's where he brings everything. That's where the real money is made. No one asks questions there, not with the coin he pays. And the base, Corvus? Robert pushed, sensing the dam breaking. Where is the Crimson Hound's true stronghold? Not the temporary camps, not the rendezvous points. The heart of it. Where are your leaders, your true commanders, if not Ulfa, found? Corvus's eyes squeezed shut, a single bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. It's in the northern peaks, he rasped, the words forced out. Beyond the broken tooth gulch, past the waterfall. It's a place called the Serpent's Coil. Hidden. Carved into the mountain. Only a few of us have ever seen it, but that's where Kylus brings the biggest hauls. That's where the most loyal of the hounds stay. He shivered, despite the warm air. They'd kill me for telling you this. The information from Zephyr was confirmed. Two independent sources, one coerced through psychological means, the other through implied physical threat, had provided identical, crucial details. Robert's expression remained impassive, but inwardly, a cold satisfaction settled over him. Robert nodded, absorbing the crucial information about Kylus and the Serpent's Coil. Thank you, Corvus, he said, his voice softer now. I will assure you that if I can request the magistrate to be lenient with you, I will. He paused, offering a new path. And if I can ask the magistrate to release you under my care, you would be a slave, legally, but I will be paying you daily wages like a freeman. You would have food, a roof, and safety from the hounds, should they discover your cooperation. He watched Corvus's face for a reaction, then pressed on, enticing him to be fully forthcoming. Would you be able to tell us who these loyal hounds are? Their names? Their locations, or where we can probably find them? And perhaps, how are they related to Kailas? Corvus's eyes, which had held only weary defiance, now flickered with a desperate hope. Daily wages, like a freeman? Safety? It was a lifeline he hadn't dared to dream of. He took a ragged breath. The loyal hounds, master? Corvus grunted, his voice gaining a new, almost eager quality. Aye. There are 5 of them, trusted by Kailas himself, beyond our regular captains. They are his eyes and hands, like Zephyr, but higher. Stronger. They collect the best hauls, guard the main caches, and know the serpent's coil intimately. There's Silas, a quiet blade, skilled with a throwing knife. Lazarus, a brute, strong as an ox, with a short temper. Milo, cunning and fast, a good scout for Kailas. And 2 others, a pair of twins, Castor and Pollux, inseparable, always together. They handle the smaller raids on their own. Their locations? Corvus continued, his memory sharpening with the promise of leniency. Silas and Lazarus mostly operate out of a hidden lodge in the Echoing Gorge, a day's ride northwest from here. Milo and the twins, Castor and Pollux, usually work from a hunting cabin in the Whispering Hills, about a day's ride directly north. I don't know the specific locations of the other 2, their movements are more varied, often traveling with Kailas himself or guarding his goods. Robert listened intently, his pen already moving across his notebook. He looked up at Corvus. Would you like to add any more information, Corvus? Anything that should help your case? Corvus considered for a long moment, then shook his head. No, master. That's all I know that would be useful to you. By the way, Robert asked, his voice casual again, what is your relationship with Zephyr? Corvus scoffed faintly. Zephyr? He's a loudmouth. A new recruit, relatively. Only been with the hounds for 2 years. He talks too much, always bragging about his family. I've been with the hounds for 10 years. We've been on a few raids together, but I don't trust him to watch my back. So, how high is he in the organization? Robert pressed, interested in how Corvus perceived Zephyr's rank compared to Zephyr's own claims. Zephyr thinks he's important, Corvus grunted, a hint of disdain in his voice. Kailas uses him for information gathering, yes, but he's easily replaced. He doesn't have the stomach for the real work. He's a scout, nothing more. A courier for Kailas, yes, but not one of the loyal hounds, not like Silas or Lazarus. And the names of the other 2, the ones who were with you, and their positions? Robert asked, referring to the initial group that Vardis had captured, besides Zephyr and Corvus. You saw who was alive, yet wounded like you. Aye, Corvus confirmed. That was Lucius, a heavy hitter, good with a club. And Brutus, quick with a spear. They're just foot soldiers, like me, but less experienced. They were with Ulfa's party for this raid. Robert nodded, a comprehensive picture forming in his mind. He had locations, names, a hierarchy, and a clear understanding of the Crimson Hound's operation. This was far more than he had hoped for. Robert nodded, his expression softening slightly as he looked at Corvus. Corvus, he said, his voice tinged with genuine apology, I thank you for your honesty. However, you still need to be blindfolded and gagged and moved to another location. He paused, meeting Corvus's gaze directly. I have to present you to the magistrate, just as I told you. This is for your own safety, as well as for the integrity of our efforts. He then commanded the men, take him. Same procedures as before. No sight, no sound, no communication. As Corvus was carefully led away, another man was brought forward, his form slumped in resignation. Can we have Rorik back here, please? Robert asked, then remembered the true name. Oh, Lucius? Whatever. As the men were moving Corvus and bringing Lucius back, Vardis and Lycos exchanged awestruck glances. They approached Robert, their faces a mixture of confusion and profound respect. How did you know, Master Robert? Vardis asked, his voice hushed. The details, they were so precise, Lycos added, almost simultaneously. How did you know they were lying, and that Corvus would speak the truth? Robert merely gave them a small, enigmatic smile. I actually do not know, he replied, a partial truth. I just asked questions. The merchant became obvious with the timing, you see. When you ask further and dig deeper into it, you would notice the inconsistencies. You do not need to ask and torture them. He paused, his gaze hardening slightly. Do not give them an answer. Let them give you the answer, and you will catch them lying. He left the unstated implication of his method hanging in the air, a lesson in psychological interrogation. Rorik, still disoriented, was brought back to the interrogation spot. The blindfold was removed, then the gag. He blinked rapidly, squinting against the sudden, disorienting brightness of the reflected sunlight, which intensified his discomfort. Robert, seated opposite him, maintained a calm demeanor. Hi, my apologies, he began, his voice soft, almost conversational. My name is Robert Lake, and you are, of course, our prisoner. I hope you are seated well. He paused, a polite nod. Again, sorry for the discomfort. Rorik, however, seemed to interpret Robert's politeness as weakness. A smug, defiant expression settled on his face, as if he expected an easy time. Robert's gaze sharpened, but his tone remained even. Let's start over again, shall we? First, tell us your name again. Rorik, emboldened by what he perceived as a soft approach, puffed out his chest slightly. Rorik, he stated, his voice a little too confident. As I told you before. All right, Rorik, Robert acknowledged. So, what is the name of your organization? Rorik's smugness faltered for a moment. He opened his mouth and began to say a different name, perhaps the name of a smaller, internal crew Alpha ran before truly joining Kailas's larger network. The Iron Vipers, he began, then caught himself. The name was unfamiliar to Robert, who merely waited. Rorik quickly corrected himself, his bravado deflating slightly. No, of course. We are the Crimson Hounds. That's our organization. Robert's eyes barely flickered, but the internal note was made, Iron Vipers. He didn't press it, choosing instead to let Rorik dig his own hole. The Crimson Hounds. Very well. And how long have you been with this organization, the one that you and Alpha were with, before joining the Hounds? Robert's gaze remained steady, awaiting Rorik's answer, a silent pressure building in the air. And how long have you been with this organization, the one that you and Alpha were with before joining the Hounds? Rorik's face, already contorted by the bright light, creased further in thought. He seemed to be calculating, trying to maintain his story. Before the Hounds, Alpha's company, that was, nearly 3 years, Master. We were a smaller group then. Just us. We did protection work. For merchants who paid. And sometimes we took what wasn't offered freely. He tried to project an air of hardened experience, a veteran of the road. Robert didn't immediately follow up on the Iron Viper's deviation. Instead, he shifted focus. Tell me about your family, Rorik. Your parents? Do you have a wife, children, any kin? Rorik's smugness fully evaporated, replaced by a sullen blankness. Family, he scoffed, but there was no real humor in it. Never knew my parents. Grew up in the streets of Praxia, a city far to the south. No kin to speak of. No wife, no children. He shrugged, as if it were of no consequence, but the emptiness in his eyes suggested otherwise. So, no one waiting for you? Robert probed further, noting the contrast to Zephyr's desperate longing. No one you send coin to, or receive word from? No, Rorik confirmed, his voice flat. It's just me. Always has been. Alpha's group, and then the Hounds, they're the closest thing I've had to a family. So, Iron Viper was it? Robert asked, casually bringing him back to his earlier slip, watching Rorik's face closely. Rorik's eyes flickered, caught off guard. He swallowed. Yes, Master. The Iron Vipers. Before the Iron, anyway, before that, what did you do? Robert pressed, his voice even, revealing nothing of his true intent. He wanted Rorik's entire timeline. Rorik's face contorted further, caught between evasion and the subtle pressure of Robert's gaze. Before that, I was just a foot soldier, Master, he grumbled, his voice rough. Hired muscle for whoever paid. Sometimes a caravan guard. Sometimes, other things. Mostly just trying to survive, picking up scraps. There was no before the vipers that matters. Robert's expression softened into one of concern, a careful mask. Nothing matters? He asked, his voice low. Then what truly mattered with the vipers, Rorik? What made you stay with them for 3 years? Rorik shifted, the question probing deeper than just facts. Survival, master, he rasped, his voice flat. They were strong. We were a unit. We ate. We had a place, even if it was just the road. It was better than nothing. Better than starving alone in Praxia. And with the hounds? Robert pressed, watching his face intently. Did it matter more or less? Rorik scoffed, a bitter sound. More, master. Definitely more. They're organized. Better raids. More loot. And Kailas, he takes care of those loyal to him. There's real coin. Why did it matter more, Rorik? Robert pushed, trying to understand the psychological draw, the difference in perceived stakes. Beyond just the coin? Rorik's eyes darted, then he swallowed, a flicker of fear mixed with a strange kind of pride crossing his face. Because Kailas has a vision, master. He talks about expanding, about controlling all the roads in Vesperia, not just a few passes. He talks about breaking the consul's grip, about creating a new order where men like us aren't left to starve. He promises power. And wealth beyond what Ulfa could ever dream of. He licked his lips. He has connections. He speaks of alliances with lords far away, across the mountains. He's not just a bandit, he's building something. Something real. And he ensures we are feared. Not just as petty thieves, but as a force. That matters, master. To be feared, to be part of something big. Robert then asked, his voice sharp, cutting through Rorik's monologue, so, which of those are true? Behind Robert, the mouths of Lycos and Vardis dropped open. They could see that Rorik's last revelation was another can of worms, a truly deep rabbit hole they had stumbled into. This wasn't just about bandits, it was about something far larger. The silence in the clearing stretched, thick with tension, as all eyes turned to Rorik, waiting for his answer. True. Rorik replied, his voice barely above a whisper, his smugness completely gone now, replaced by a desperate need to believe his own words. It's all true, master. Every word of it. Robert's gaze hardened. What are you not telling us? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I am telling you the truth. Rorik insisted, his voice rising, a frantic edge to it now. Okay, Robert said, his tone unexpectedly accepting, as if he believed Rorik completely. He then changed the subject entirely, a casual pivot that disarmed the bandit. Lucius, how much money do you make? Do you have some saved up? Rorik blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift to his finances and the use of his true name. He swallowed, then stammered, I usually make around 5 denarii per successful raid, master. Maybe 10 if it's a big one. And I have about 20 denarii saved. Hidden under a loose stone by the old mill at the edge of the forest. Near Ethelberg. He looked away, ashamed of his meager savings. So, Robert asked, his voice still deceptively mild, which name shall we use again? Rorik or Lucius? Rorik flinched, his eyes darting to the unmoving figures of Vardis and Lycos, then back to Robert's unwavering stare. Lucius, he stammered, his voice barely audible. My true name is Lucius. And that is your real name? Robert pressed, making him confirm it. Yes, master. Lucius. Why did you say your name was Rorik then? Lucius winced, a raw honesty finally breaking through. It's a cover, master. We all use them on raids, away from home. To keep our true names clean, should we be caught. To protect our families. Not that I have one. But, it's what Ulfa told us to do. To lie if caught. To give only general details. Robert then returned to the heart of the conspiracy, his interest visibly piqued. This wasn't just about bandits anymore, it was about power and profit. Lucius, Robert began, his voice taking on a new, almost conversational tone, I will now call you Lucius. So, what is Kailas's plan again? Tell me everything he has promised, and what he intends to do. Lucius, desperate to please and seeing this as his only way out, launched into a torrent of information. Kailas's plan, Master, is to control all the trade routes in Vesperia. Not just robbing caravans, but taxing them. He wants to starve the consul's coffers, undermine the Solarian Imperium's presence here, and then step in. He talks about building a new city, free from imperial rule, a true haven for those who seek opportunity outside the old ways. He needs money, and loyal men, to do it. So the names of his allies are? Robert followed up, sensing the deeper network. Allies? Lucius scoffed, a return of his brief, former smugness. Kailas has no allies he trusts. Only instruments. He speaks of lords far in the northern mountains, chieftains of savage tribes who he supplies with weapons and coin to raid imperial outposts. And he has contact with certain disgraced merchants from the Tyrian League, those who resent the Solarian Imperium's dominance. He uses them to move goods and gather intelligence in other regions. He has no friends, Master, only arrangements. And do you think he'd win? Robert asked, almost musing, evaluating the grand ambition Kailas supposedly held. Lucius hesitated, then a cold conviction hardened his eyes. Yes, Master. He has to. He's building something. He's smarter than the consuls. He has a network, and he pays better than the Imperium. He gives us purpose, Master. He can win. Robert pressed on, his voice calm, yet the question was a hammer blow. Lucius, I will now call you Lucius. So, the names of these contacts, these instruments of Kailas? The lords, the chieftains, the merchants. Give me their names. Lucius swallowed hard, his eyes darting. This was the truly dangerous information. He clearly struggled, but the implicit threat of Vardis and Lycos, coupled with Robert's unsettling calm, weighed heavily. The lords, there's Chief Borin of the mountain clans, to the far north. And Lord Kalen, a chieftain who holds the Iron Hills beyond the Great River. For the merchants, there's Thorn, a former guildmaster from Tyria, now operating from the port city of Viridian Coast. He handles Kailas's larger shipments. Robert's gaze sharpened, cutting through any lingering doubt. Are you sure, Lucius? You are not playing around with us? We have other ways of confirming your words. Lying now would only make your situation far worse. Lucius flinched, fear eclipsing everything else. No, Master. I swear. By Yowa. I am telling you the truth. What more could I gain by lying now? He pleaded, his voice desperate. They are the ones. I swear it. Then how do we get to Kailas? Robert asked, his voice low, the crucial question hanging in the air. Where does he stay? Where does he conduct these grand meetings? Lucius shuddered, the confession clearly tearing at him, but the fear of Robert's unknown methods was stronger. He stays at the Serpent's Coil, Master. That's his main stronghold. Deep in the northern peaks, beyond the Broken Tooth Gulch waterfall. It's a fortress, carved into the mountain. Only his most trusted are allowed there. He looked at Robert's impassive face. It's almost impregnable. Robert nodded, then his voice took on a sharper edge. We could confirm this with Brutus, you know, he stated, referencing the last captive. He spilled all the beans, so to speak. If he tells us the same, your words will carry more weight. If he doesn't. Lucius's eyes widened in renewed terror. No. He knows. Brutus, he was with us when Kailas spoke of the Serpent's Coil. He knows the rendezvous points, the routes. He knows everything I've told you. He'll confirm it, Master. I promise. He began to babble, desperate to prevent further interrogation. He's just as much in the dark about the deeper plans as I am, but he knows the places. Robert nodded. Okay, where is Kailas now? Lucius's gaze darted around, as if Kailas might appear from the trees. He left the Serpent's Coil yesterday, Master. He was heading south, towards Viridian Coast. To meet Thorn, I believe, to plan the next major move. So you are positive about that? Robert pressed, his tone quiet but firm. You're sure he left yesterday? Not a few days ago, not a week. Positive, Master. I saw him myself. He gave orders for the next week's activities before he departed. He was on a fast horse, with a small escort. He'll be at Viridian Coast by now, or very close. Robert paused, his gaze fixed on Lucius. The trap was about to be sprung. How about you take us to that serpent place, Lucius? Now. Lucius's eyes went wide, and he began to shake. No. Master. I can't. They'll kill me. It's too dangerous. Only Kailas's inner circle, the loyal hounds, know the true path without getting lost in the mountains. And even then, it's treacherous. They guard it fiercely. He was trembling violently, his voice a desperate whimper. I barely know the first part of the way myself. I've only been taken there a few times, always blindfolded for the last leg of the journey. Robert saw that the data from Zephyr, the first captive, and Corvus, the third captive, now strongly corroborated Lucius's testimony regarding Kailas's vision, his key contacts, his recent departure, and the location and nature of the serpent's coil. The puzzle pieces were fitting together. He leaned in, his voice taking on a new, almost sympathetic tone, but with an underlying steel that brooked no argument. If you cannot take us, Lucius, what can you do for us at this point? Something that will genuinely help your case, something that will get you off the executioner's block. Lucius whimpered, desperation clouding his features. I can tell you the next ambush. I can tell you their numbers. I can tell you if there are other groups. He latched onto this, seeing it as his last chance. Yes. That's what I can do. I know the next schedule for our particular pack. Robert's eyes narrowed. He whipped out the next question, deliberately taking Lucius off guard, shifting the focus abruptly. Can you tell us if there is another group who will ambush the caravan? Oh, and when is it supposed to pass by the way? Lucius stammered, caught off balance by the sudden shift. Another group? No, Master. Not that I know of. Not in this area. Only us, the Crimson Hounds, operate these northern routes for Kailas. Sometimes other gangs are paid for raids further south, or in the eastern passes, but not here. He shook his head emphatically. And the caravan, the one we were supposed to hit, it's the Friday caravan, Master. Due this coming Friday. Okay, so it's not Tuesday, Robert clarified, connecting the dots. Then, are there any other hounds who are coming here? Any reinforcements for this Friday caravan ambush? Lucius's head shook frantically. No, Master. Not for this one. Ulfa's pack, that was it. We were assigned this pass. Other hounds only come if it's a very large, planned movement, or if Kailas calls them from Serpent's Coil. Not for a regular Friday caravan. Why are you this early again? Robert asked, his gaze piercing. It was Monday, and they'd been prepared for a Tuesday ambush. This anomaly bothered him. Lucius cringed. It was Ulfa's order, Master. He said the consul's guards might be getting bolder, or the merchants might be sending escorts. He wanted us positioned and ready, to avoid any surprises. To ensure we had the best ground before anyone else. He swallowed hard. He was paranoid, Master. Always paranoid. Robert then asks an irrelevant question. So you never met your parents? Lucius's eyes widened, genuinely surprised by the abrupt personal turn, the shift from imminent danger to a question of his past. The glare from the reflected sun made him squint, but his raw emotion was clear. No, Master, he whispered, his voice thin. Never. I was raised in the orphanage in Praxia, like Corvus said. A foundling. My earliest memories are of the older children and the strict matron. Where are you from again? Robert pressed, his tone soft, almost inviting more details. He knew the answer, but he wanted to hear it from Lucius, to see if he'd stick to the truth now that he was so thoroughly broken. Lucius had said Praxia earlier, but Robert wanted to see if the desperation would make him invent a hometown, a family. Lucius swallowed, tears welling in his eyes again, mixing with the pain. Praxia, Master. The city far to the south. That's where the orphanage was. I'm from Praxia. He confirmed the detail, Clinging to the only truth he had left about his origins, his voice filled with a hollow ache. "So here is where we are," Robert stated, his voice returning to a sharp, professional tone, deliberately letting the question hang in the air. "You can tell us when is the next ambush?" Lucius flinched, the abrupt return to the immediate threat jarring him. "Yes, master. The next one is the Friday caravan. That's our target. The one I told you about. But you said it is only the hounds here, so who is going to ambush if almost all of you are dead? Your entire pack, save for you four, is eliminated." Robert's question was a direct challenge to the inconsistency, his gaze piercing. Lucius stammered, his mind racing to fill the void, his eyes darting frantically. "No, master. Not all of us. There are other packs. Other hounds who operate these northern routes. They just don't travel in our immediate group. Kylus rotates us. This was just Ulfa's pack for this run. There's Garrus's pack and Talon's pack. They cover the other days, the other caravans. They might be setting up for Tuesday already, or waiting for the Friday caravan too. Now for the other robberies, can you give us the details of it?" Robert pressed, capitalizing on the new information and Lucius's panic. "The ones not involving Ulfa's pack. Where did they happen? What was taken? Dates, times, anything you know." Lucius, sensing he was now truly earning his potential leniency, began to pour out information, a torrent of desperate detail. Garrus's pack, they hit the eastern road a month ago, near the Whispering Pines. Took a caravan of textiles and dyes. And Talon's pack, they struck the southern pass, 2 weeks before that. A wine shipment, and some raw copper. They favor different spots, different days. Kylus always gives us the target, ensures we don't interfere with each other's collections. He orchestrates it all from Serpent's Coil. He rattled off what dates he could recall, along with the rough times and the types of goods stolen. Robert ended their talk with a decisive nod. "Thank you very much for your assistance, Lucius. You can say I will give you a good word with the magistrate. There is a strong case that you will not be executed, but we can find you a good place to hide. You'll eventually get killed in the prison anyway, but we do not want that now, do we?" Lucius slumped in relief, the terror momentarily abating. He was then dismissed, along with the other 3 captives, Zephyr and Brutus, all gagged, blindfolded, and separated to be held in secure, remote spots within the controlled clearing, completely cut off from each other and the ongoing interrogations. Finally, Robert announced to Vardis and his team leaders, "I think we can take a break now. We will proceed with our rendezvous point, the ambush site. We will stay there and wait until the Friday caravan arrives." Vardis and the team leaders immediately set about carrying out the orders, moving their forces and the cart deeper into the forest towards the designated ambush point. The vigil and the unseen threat. Upon arrival, Robert immediately put their newest, most reliable captive to work. "Corvus," Robert ordered, "you will assist the militia. You know the Crimson Hound's methods and tactics better than anyone here. Uncover their standard ambushing procedures, their tells, their weaknesses." Corvus, seeing this as his direct path to Robert's favor and potential freedom, complied without question. Meanwhile, Vardis, Lycos, and the other team leaders positioned themselves strategically, now with the added burden of accounting for another potential ambush group. Since Lucius had revealed that Ulfa's pack might have merely been an advanced party, and that Garrus's or Talon's packs might arrive on Tuesday, they had to take extra precautions. Robert apprised all the men of the new intelligence, informing them of the possibility of encountering a different, fresh group of hounds. He ordered them to man all possible entry points into the ambush pass, but stressed the critical importance of remaining completely concealed. Their ghillie suits, the Phantasma Verde, would be put to their ultimate test as they maintained their silent vigil, waiting for a Tuesday ambush that might never come, while preparing for the main Friday target. The forest was now their silent, deadly home. By nightfall, all of the prisoners were separated in their respective remote spots. Their blindfolds and gags had been removed, allowing them to eat and drink the meager rations provided, though their hands remained bound. All, that is, except for Brutus. Robert had Brutus brought over, led away from the rest to a secluded part of the clearing where no one could possibly hear their conversation. Robert carried with him some home technology, a bright LED lamp. To the men who had seen it earlier, it looked like an ordinary, though remarkably efficient, lamp. Brutus was seated on the ground, his arms still bound, his blindfold and gag in place. Robert instructed one of his men to stay behind Brutus, ready to untie the blindfold and the gag at his signal. Robert signaled, "Take the gag off, first." The man behind Brutus carefully removed it. "Then wait there. Do not move even when you have taken the blindfold off." When the man was ready to remove the blindfold, Robert gave another signal. He turned off the LED lamp, plunging the immediate area into near darkness, illuminated only by faint starlight and distant campfires. "Now, take the blindfold off." As Brutus's eyes, accustomed to darkness, fluttered open, Robert snapped on a very bright LED spotlight, aiming it directly at Brutus's face. The sudden, intense glare was blinding, easily capable of burning delicate eye lenses if sustained, causing immediate, profound discomfort. Brutus cried out, wrenching his head away, but the man behind him held him steady. Robert instructed, "Hold the spotlight steady on his face." "Hello, Brutus." Robert's voice cut through the darkness, calm and clear, amplified slightly by the translator's neural pathways. "I am Robert Lake. I lead these people here. Do you know why you are here?" Brutus groaned, shielding his eyes with his shoulder as best he could against the searing light. Because we're bandits," he rasped, his voice hoarse from the gag and fear. "Because you ambushed us." "That is certainly part of it," Robert conceded, his voice devoid of judgment. "Now that you are here, what do you think you will be doing from now on? What do you expect your future holds?" Brutus's head slumped forward, defeat heavy in his posture. I'll be taken to Castillo's. To the consul. Then probably executed. Or sold into hard labor, if I'm lucky." He shuddered. "Perhaps the mines." "Do you have any family, Brutus?" Robert's voice softened, but the spotlight remained fixed on his face, relentless. "Parents? A wife? Children? Anyone waiting for you?" Robert's cold questions, amplified by the relentless spotlight, drilled into Brutus. "Do you have any family, Brutus?" Robert's voice softened, but the spotlight remained fixed on his face, relentless. "Parents? A wife? Children? Anyone waiting for you?" Brutus groaned, shielding his eyes with his shoulder as best he could against the searing light. He tried to turn his head, but the man behind him held him steady. "Family," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "No, master. No parents I knew. I grew up in a small town called Redstone, near the mountains, bounced from one distant relative's farm to another until I was old enough to work. No wife. No children." He swallowed, a flicker of raw, personal pain crossing his face before it hardened into resignation. "No one waiting." Robert didn't expect this. Brutus, despite having been informed his cover was blown and his supposed Rorik name was useless, seemed to possess a hardened cynicism. Robert's sharp gaze caught a fleeting micro-expression, a flicker of weary resignation, perhaps, but also a hint of something calculating. "What is your role in the hounds, Brutus?" Robert asked, his voice direct, cutting through the prior pleasantries. Brutus grunted, his face still in shadow from the harsh light. "I'm a spearbearer, master. A fighter. When Alpha called, I came. I'm good with the spear, and quick." He seemed to pride himself on his straightforward combat role. "And before the hounds, what were you doing?" Robert pressed, wanting to understand his pre-bandit life beyond simply trying to survive. "Before them?" Brutus gave a short, humorless chuckle. "Scavenging. Sometimes a guard for a traveling merchant. Sometimes, less savory work. Whatever kept me fed and out of the cold. Never stayed in one place long." "Did you ever have plans for your future then?" Robert asked, digging deeper into his past motivations. "A goal beyond just the next meal." Brutus scoffed. "Plans? For a man like me? No, master. The future was always the next sunrise, if I was lucky. Never saw much point in it." "And what are your goals now, Brutus? Robert's question was quiet, but it held the weight of potential. What do you want from your future, now that you're here? Brutus squinted against the light, his eyes focusing on Robert. A long silence stretched between them, then he sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. Goals now? Master, my goal is not to be executed. My goal is to not be sent to the mines. My goal is to simply survive. Perhaps find a master who doesn't throw men away like broken tools. The darkness of the northern forest pressed in around them, the canopy of the trees blocking out any hint of starlight. The only illumination came from the harsh lights aimed directly at Brutus's face. His features, rough and large, were thrown into stark relief. From a different angle, one might even say he looked threatening, larger than he truly was. He was more of an athlete, built for speed, but the arrow had found its mark, striking the tendon of his Achilles, leaving him with a pronounced limp. The facial hair he sported, thick and unkempt, did indeed remind Robert of that cartoon character from back home. Yes, Brutus, Popeye's nemesis. Robert resumed his questioning, his voice calm but firm. So, has any master discarded you, Brutus? Brutus grunted, shifting uncomfortably under the glare. Discarded? Aye, more than one. Some died, some sold me off, some just wandered off and left me to fend for myself. Why do you think that will happen here? Robert followed up, his gaze unwavering. Brutus hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Because, that's how it always is, master. Men like me, we're tools. Used until we break, then tossed aside. I've seen it happen to better men than me. What would you do to avoid any worse thing to happen to you? Robert pressed, his voice softer now, probing for any sign of desperation or willingness to cooperate. Brutus's jaw tightened. I'd do whatever it takes, master. Work hard, obey orders, fight like a demon if you need me to. I'm not afraid of work or of blood. If you are to cooperate with us, what would you offer? Robert asked, a hint of steel entering his tone. Brutus swallowed hard, the light reflecting in his suddenly wary eyes. My loyalty, master. My strength. My knowledge of the hounds. I know their ways, their camps, their leaders. Can you give us more information on the structure of your organization? Robert leaned forward slightly, the intensity of his gaze amplified by the darkness. Brutus hesitated, then seemed to deflate, the fight going out of him. He sighed, a sound of utter resignation. The hounds, it's not much of an organization, master. More like a pack of wolves, following the strongest. Alpha, he's the alpha. He decides where we raid, who we kill, what we take. There are a few others, like Gunnar and Eric, they are his lieutenants. They lead smaller groups, maybe 10 or 15 men each. Most of us are just spearbearers, like me. We follow orders, we fight, we try to stay alive. There's no fancy hierarchy, no ranks or titles. Just Alpha, his favorites, and the rest of us. Robert's gaze fixed on Brutus's injured leg, then the hole in his thigh. The tendon was clearly torn, halfway through, and blood still oozed sluggishly. He knew the limitations of this world's medicine. But Brutus, Robert said, his voice dropping, tinged with a cold practicality, what good of a soldier are you to me, when you cannot run anymore? Your tendon, there is just no way it can be operated on or truly cured in this world now. You'll always limp. You'll always be slow. Brutus's face contorted, a mixture of despair and fury. His greatest asset, his speed, was gone. I can still fight, master. I can still wield a spear. Perhaps, Robert conceded, but your value as a foot soldier is diminished. Would you prefer an alternative then? A different path where your strength can still be used, despite this injury. Brutus's head snapped up, hope flickering in his eyes despite the blinding light. Alternative? What alternative, master? First, Robert demanded, cutting through his renewed hope, give us the full names of the leaders of the hounds that you know of, beyond Alpha. And where can we find them? Brutus hesitated, then began to speak, his voice gaining a desperate clarity. The real leaders are Garrus and Talon, master. They command the other packs. Garrus often moves through the eastern foothills, usually near the old hermit's cave. Talon favors the southern marshlands, around the sunken temple ruins. Kylus pulls their strings. Are you sure of this, Brutus? Robert's voice was a flat challenge. You're not playing games with me now, are you? Because the consequences will be severe. Brutus flinched, the implicit threat clear. Yes. Master. I am sure. By Yorwa. That's where they hide. That's where they plan. Field surgery. Okay, Robert stated, putting down his questioning stick. First, let me see your feet. He knelt down, inspecting the gruesome wound on Brutus's right ankle and the hole in his thigh. The blood oozed steadily, a stark reminder of the infection that would soon set in. Robert knew that in this world, this man was a lost cause, destined for a slow, agonizing death or crippling disability. He, however, saw something else, a potential war slave laborer, if he could save him. Back in the martial law days of the Philippines, some constabulary officers even used detainees as a labor force. Robert had no qualms about enslaving these men, they were bandits, after all. He stood up. Can we get all of the captives here? He ordered his men, his voice resonating with newfound authority. I think I forgot about their wounds. Since we will be staying here for a while, their wounds might get infected if not cleaned. As his men brought the other 3 captives, Zephyr, Lucius, and Corvus, laying them out carefully, Robert inspected each wound. As a gunrunner, Robert had operated in dangerous places in his old world, selling guns, particularly in southern Mindanao. On one of those runs, he'd gotten stuck for a few months with a group of doctors who called themselves Freemasons Without Borders. These doctors would go into dangerous conflict zones and operate on anyone, regardless of affiliation. It was here that Robert, the pragmatic gunsmith, had learned how to stitch people up. He'd even had to stitch a few himself after some particularly nasty close calls during the Kumpit smuggling runs, not the standard boats, but the smuggler-class Kumpit that outran authorities in the backdoor entries of the Philippines. He had sold a lot of weapons to several warlords in Mindanao, not just the Muslim warlords, the ones high up, the Highlanders, 48 tribes against less than 10 tribes of the Muslim region, were his best customers, often just as heavily armed. He'd even seen, and participated in, some underground operations in Mindanao involving kidnapping and having the kidnapped people perform real sword fights to the death, if it cannot be avoided. He knew how to stitch. Now, in this ancient forest, Robert started rummaging through his bag, scratching his head. This is going to be tight, he muttered, realizing the limitations of his field kit. He asked one of his men to hold the lead lamp steady, directing the bright beam onto Brutus's Achilles tendon. He started with Brutus first, as his wound seemed the worst. Robert understood he couldn't perform a full PAS system repair, percutaneous Achilles repair system, on the tendon, he lacked the equipment. But since it was only a partial tear, there was a high probability it would repair itself with rest and proper care. He meticulously cleaned the wound area, then disinfected it with alcohol. This is going to hurt, he warned Brutus, his voice grim. But before he began the stitching, he paused, his gaze fixed on the captive. Can you take the pain of the needle, Brutus? Robert asked, his voice low, a final test of the man's resolve. Or do you want something for it? Something for it? Brutus repeated, confusion clouding his pain-filled eyes. He clearly didn't understand the offer. I have something that dulls the pain, Robert explained, his voice calm. He looked at the other 3 wounded bandits, who were now laid out nearby, their groans echoing softly. And I'll ask you all the same. This will help with the pain from the stitching. Their eyes, though wary, widened with a desperate hope, and they nodded vigorously. There was a lot of blood, a stark contrast to the sterile environments Robert remembered. His mind went to mipivacaine, a local anesthetic he'd seen the Freemasons Without Borders doctors use in that ungodly country back home planet, where he'd slipped in and out through the back door of his country, the Philippines. Backdoor is the term that was used by the Filipinos back in the 80s to denote exiting and entering the country without informing the authorities. He quickly pulled out a syringe and a vial from his bag, preparing the injection. He started with Brutus, fearing the anesthetic might not last long enough if he dallied. He injected the localized anesthesia near Brutus's Achilles tendon. You'll start to lose feeling here, Robert instructed, watching for the drug's effect. Just let me know when it seems to harden or stiffen, when you can't feel anything. He quickly pulled on a pair of latex gloves, a slight grimace on his face, better late than never. Then he gently touched the torn skin around the wound. Do you feel any pain here now? Slightly, Brutus rasped, still flinching. Robert injected another dose into the deep wound on his thigh. He waited a few moments, then tested the areas again. Satisfied, he poured another round of alcohol over the ankle wound, disinfecting it thoroughly despite the sting it might still cause the partially numb flesh. He applied a bit of penicillin powder directly into the wound, a what-the-heck move. He remembered how, when he was young, they just bought this drug over the counter, ground it to powder, and applied it directly to wounds. It seemed to work, wounds healed faster with no infection. He began the delicate process of stitching the skin to close the opening, working methodically. After stitching, he applied betadine and another topping of penicillin. Once the stitching was done, he bandaged it tightly. Since he didn't have a proper cast, he asked for some straight pieces of wood. He improvised a splint to restrict the movement of the foot, carefully bandaging it again. Brutus, Robert said firmly, you must not walk. You must lie down and cannot move this foot for maybe half a year. For now, no getting up until we get you proper care back in Castillo's. He then moved methodically to the other 3 captives, performing the same procedures on their wounds, minus the splints where not necessary. He cleaned, disinfected, stitched, applied antibiotics, and bandaged each one, ensuring their immediate survival and preventing infection. All that was left now was to wait. Wait for the Friday caravan, and for whatever other packs of crimson hounds might appear.